Welcome to MHN Voices, our series through which we present insightful discussions among industry thought leaders, moderated by our editorial team. I'm Suzanne Silverman, Editorial Director of Multi-Housing News, and our expert panel today includes Aaron Bracken, Vice President of Technology Strategy at Real Property Management, Cindy Clare, COO at Bell Partners, Pratik Dhebri, Vice President of Product Management and Head of Digital Product at AvalonBay Communities, Tim Kramer, Vice President and Director of Operations at Draper and Kramer, and Arjun, Vice President at Yardi. And today we're looking at effective AI strategies. We're recording this session and it'll be available for later viewing. In addition, we're going to leave some time at the end to answer your questions, but please feel free to submit them at any time during the webinar. Don't be shy. And thank you to those of you who submitted some in advance. We'll try to get to as many as possible. We're going to start with a basic question, since most companies, although they've experimented with incorporation of AI, are still trying to figure out how to develop a meaningful strategy. And Pratik, I'll start with you. How do you recommend that they get started on setting up a viable plan?
Yes, a great question, Suzanne. I would say it's on top of mind for many CEOs, board members. Everyone's asking, what should we do with AI, right? In fact, I'm sure a lot of our fellow panelists, as well as the audience here, is AI going to eat my job or take my job away? And I would say no. The thing is, a person who uses AI is likely to replace you if you're not using AI. So it's definitely top of mind, not only at the executive level, but also at the individual level. And I would say with the launch of ChatGPT about 3 years back now, has really revolutionized what AI can do and cannot do. So I would say when you look at defining an AI strategy, you have to really look at a multi-layer approach. For some of the foodies in the audience, I would say it's like a multi-layer cake as well, right? So the top layer of the cake, which is the icing, is really, are you able to engage with your customers meaningfully in a timely fashion using artificial intelligence? So I'll kind of break down the top layer into prospects, which are people who are looking, searching for apartments, want to tour an apartment before they take the decision to apply for an apartment. So we have leveraged a leasing assistant. We call her Sydney internally, which is able to handle close to 85% of all the inbound customer inquiries that we get from a prospect standpoint. So that's a meaningful accomplishment for us here at AvalonBay. Think of it, of 85% of the routine questions that you get is, does your apartment allow pets? Is it close to a metro station, etc., can be handled by Sydney without getting a human associate involved. We're also doing quite a few pilots on the resident engagement journey. So this is where, how could we meaningfully engage with our residents who are staying with us so that we can give them best in class service and a meaningful engagement as well. The next layer of this multi-layered strategy is, how do you really enable associates to be much more productive? So I would say at the very basic, a lot of companies, including AvalonBay, we piloted the co-pilots of the world, right? Like a Microsoft 365 co-pilot. It has definitely helped a lot with our associates, both customer facing as well as internal functions, because now in lieu of drafting a contract from scratch, they can just review a contract or use Copilot to create a contract, right? However, we have not seen a lot of meaningful savings when it comes to utilizing a Copilot like assistant. So what I would say the bigger bang for the buck, which we have seen in associate productivity, is when we look at business processes in an end-to-end fashion. And I'll pick an example that we are currently working on is the whole move out business process. So right from the time a resident gives a notice, all the way till the resident finally collects their deposit check in the mail, there is a sequence of events that happen. Many of them involve multiple associates touching that process And how could we look at the process as a whole? How could we reduce the steps using AI automation, or in fact, even eliminate multiple steps in the process by making it more automated and using AI to make the determination. The next layer of this cake is what I would say is enabling executives and managers to make decisions very quickly. So I'll start with AvalonBay's roots as a developer. So we spend a lot of time in doing market analysis, investment analysis, as well as in this market, sub-market, can we pick the best site? And then leading a step forward is what kind of product mix should we develop in this particular site based on the demographics, the psychographics of the people who are really using an AvalonBay product. So this could include how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, studios should we build? Should we have 3 bedrooms and higher units as well? And last but not the least, I would say this is probably the most important one, is do we have the right data? So like any building, every building stands on a good foundation. I would consider data as being that good foundation on top of which you can build a lot of AI. So as a part of your AI strategy, don't just look at your consumer experiences, associate experiences, uh, enabling decision making, but also focus a lot on data. And here at AvalonBay, what we have done is we have tried to build single sources of truth systems. So we know everything about a customer in one single place. We know everything about our inventory, our assets in one single place, which is the most accurate, up-to-date information, as well as the transactions between our customers and our inventory. So that's kind of really helping us supercharge our AI efforts very quickly. What I've seen when we started 3 years back, we had a lot of point solutions with data being fragmented silos, and that really hampered our journey to really deliver meaningful AI engagement with our residents as well as our customers.
Thank you, Pratik. Anybody have anything to add on that question?
Yeah, I have a little bit. So all those things that you were talking about there was communication, and that is what the number one thing in this industry, I think, is communication followed by really second close of processes. And so I think one thing that you should be looking at when you're looking at your business and you're wanting to develop a AI strategy is where are we at and what can you affect right now? Because as you know, ChatGPT launched about 3 years ago, I think. And so right now, the large language models, that communication, along with voice and also image recognition, those are the leading front runners right now for AI. Some of the other stuff, like the agentic and workflows, they're coming and they're coming quickly, but definitely the communication side is much better and much more easy to implement within your organization and other vendors and elements of your business. Uh, so that's what I think you should be focusing on first. It's the lowest hanging fruit, and it also gives you a very good bang for your buck as going into that side of it. So I think if you set your expectations and really kind of hone in on what problem you're trying to solve with AI, you're going to find what you need. Now, as far as the other stuff, the workflows and the agentic AI that's coming, I think there's a lot of buzz around there, and it's important to separate those buzzwords and what's really capable and what the capabilities are now, because you can waste a lot of time trying to chase that golden goose, so to speak, if it's not ready and ready to be implemented in your business.
One other
I
thing I would
think,
add
yeah, please, Cindy.
from an operations standpoint is I agree with both Aaron and Pratik on the things that you look at. But from an operations standpoint, anything where from a legal standpoint, we need consistency. So when you think about fair housing, when you can allow an AI tool like Sydney, we use a lead management tool as well. It allows you to make sure that the responses that you're giving are consistent. And that, from a legal standpoint, helps tremendously because we can't always control what our teams are going to say, and we can't control how they're going to be answered by having the AI tool and being able to give that basic information. Now, Aaron said it, it's the basic information right now. It's not sophisticated enough yet to answer complicated questions, but it's getting there. But if you can take 80% away and it's consistent in the responses and the response time is consistent. So when you think about lead management and follow-up and the fact that you're consistently then following up, you're not leaving it to the schedules of your team when they've got people coming in the door and so forth. Those are the things that can really help you and make a difference for your teams. And Aaron alluded to this as well, which is don't put AI in to put AI in. Look for the problems you need to solve. What are the things that are causing challenges or pain points for your teams or processes that don't work well because they're handed off to 4 or 5 different people, like Pratik mentioned? Those are the things where AI can make you more efficient and more effective.
Thanks. Yeah, those are good things to consider when you're deciding what should or shouldn't be automated. I like that. Thinking about the problems you need to solve and the pain points. And Arjun, how do you separate AI hype from, which I get Aaron referred to as buzz, from the tools and the use cases that truly deliver business value?
Yeah, I think Pratik gave an excellent kind of overview of all the different layers of the cake, and I got hungry just listening to him. But it was I think a very good overview of it. Well, I think, when I look at kind of all the news around AI, it can be pretty overwhelming to think about it overall. I think what's helpful for all of us is we're in multifamily, and within, yes, every company does something slightly different, but in broad strokes, they're relatively similar processes to each other, partly because of regulations, partly because people move from company to company. And so when we think about AI just in multifamily, then we have kind of two sort of core breakdowns. The first is what Aaron mentioned, which is communication, everything around residents and prospects. And the second is something that Pratik talked about, which is the enterprise facing, right? What's helping my agents, what's helping my investors, et cetera. And on the consumer facing side, like Aaron and Cindy mentioned, the the kind of value that has been demonstrated by AI agents or chat agents, et cetera, I think is pretty well sort of seen at this point. The ability to significantly reduce uh, the amount of work that your human agents have to take on. I think that is pretty well proven, and those will get more and more powerful. One thing that Cindy mentioned, which I think is really important, is on the legal side, it's kind of one of these funny things where it's like, oh, this is actually a sensitive topic. I shouldn't have AI do it, right? That might have been the initial thought maybe a couple of years ago, but actually it's the reverse, which is it's much more consistent. It's much more likely to hit the regulatory requirement because it's consistent and it's going to do what it's going to do. And so we're seeing that there's much more power in actually following all the different regulatory requirements when you unleash AI on that. And I would say, related to another point that Cindy made, the consistency and follow-up, the new stuff, which Aaron is saying is not here yet, but it is coming very, very soon. This agentic AI, which I hope we'll talk a lot about today, and it's coming in the next couple of months. It's not like years. And when you think about, you have an agentic AI workflow for leasing, and within that workflow, you might have specific agents, and one agent's job is to kind of assess this customer. And Pratik mentioned, okay, I have all of my customer data in one place. Well, now you can assess everything about that customer. What were all the prior communications with them? What are their preferences? What are their preferred channels of communication? What are they responding to, either text or email or voice most often, and at what times of day, and so on. And if you have that type of an agent, and then you have another agent that's saying, well, what does this property need? What is its availability, right? What is its occupancy level at this point, et cetera? And you match that together, then you can actually get a very specific prospect follow-up mechanism, right? Somebody who's moving in 7 to 10 days should have a completely different follow-up mechanism than somebody who's moving in 60 days, especially if the one in 60 days doesn't have a match in terms of availability, but the one in 7 days does. So I think that there's going to be a huge amount of value to clients that I think we're already seeing in multifamily, and it's happening maybe faster than I've seen in other industries because it is very much a specific type of workflow. And I think it's kind of, what I like about real estate companies is it's a pragmatic point of view generally, right? People want the ROI. They're not just sort of chasing things. They have to be grounded in what's providing value to my customers. And so I think we have less of that risk here in multifamily.
Arjun, you actually saying we're going to be on the cutting edge in multifamily? I don't know that we've ever said that about technology in the multifamily space.
I agree, but it's funny. Like we attended, Salesforce's their big Dreamforce and their big AI kind of events, and they have a lot of good things, but I would say multifamily is doing quite well in the broader world. And I would say it's due to there's a lot of good competition in the multifamily world, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting as you look at property management as a whole. It always seemed to me like back 15, 20 years, it lagged behind a lot of the technology that was coming out. And so in the last 10 years, we saw a really big increase in the cloud operations, your OS there, your leasing, everything getting into the cloud, which has been fantastic. But what I get really excited about is, to me, property management and technology was made for each other. I mean, there is so much that we can affect in this business with good workflows and good processes and AI. We're going to be benefiting from this big boom, big time. But it's also is going to be a disruptor to us because you're going to have barriers to entry lowering for new entrance into the system. And so I do think the technology, we're going to be gaining a lot of benefits from it. We also have to be pretty focused on staying ahead of that curve.
Right.
Yep.
Along those lines, Tim, what are the biggest challenges you've encountered in implementation, and what should owners and operators expect to come up against?
Yeah, well, I mean, pick your poison, right? I mean, we go in any number of directions and find all sorts of problems, especially amongst an industry that, as we've been discussing, hasn't done a whole lot. Pre 10 years ago, the previous 50 years, we didn't see as much change as we have in the last 10 years. And I'll tell you, I think the first step in thinking about implementation challenges comes before the implementation, and that is separating the noise from the substance. The best solutions out there aren't necessarily the ones that are at the forefront and are marketing the most aggressively, right? It pays to talk to your peers. It pays to talk to your current providers and find out what they're doing, because very often, we took a very purposeful stance to single stack our technology, right? So that way, as our current partners come up with new solutions, we can adapt without moving outside and having to worry about third-party integrations and so forth. So even if our current partners don't have best in class, it would take a substantial difference for us to consider moving outside, just again because of those integration issues. The second part about integration or about implementation issues really has to do with buy-in, and I know buy-in is going to be a topic that we'll discuss later, but it's making sure that as part of that implementation plan, you've involved the end users, both end users, right? Customers as in residents and customers as in your teams on site, is making sure that you're really solving a problem. There are a lot of solutions out there in search of problems, and that's all part of that sort of that pre-work that you want to do ahead of time. So you want to make sure that they're involved very early on in the implementation process, so that you're headed in a direction that'll be meaningful. Because if you don't have that buy-in, then there's really no sense in continuing. And then, or be very challenging at the best. And the other thing is, during the implementation process, is to make sure you're getting honest feedback. And another thing we did very intentionally is we don't implement change necessarily that comes directly from the C-suites. So my apologies to those of you that are in the C-suites. Or from, say, the asset management point of view, right? We want our change to come from those that will have to live with the technology going forward. And right, and no shade in any of those directions, but I'll be the first to admit I'm not as connected with on-site as I used to be, right? When I was regional manager or site manager. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our teams involved in the implementation, aren't fatigued by implementation, right? How much new stuff has been implemented in the past year, because implementation fatigue is very real, and also that that they're involved from the beginning and are welcoming of the change, or as much as they can be. Nobody likes too much change, but it's imperative that they be involved in the implementation process from the very beginning.
I would say, speaking from the C-suite standpoint, I totally agree with Tim.
Thank you.
I tell providers all the time, don't convince me about your product, convince the people that are going to use it, because it's far better if they bring it to me than me pushing it down. And I think the buy-in is critical. The ease of use for both our customer and our associates is critical, because it's not going to get used, and it's not going to get used well if they can't use it. And I think the other thing Tim said, the balance between single stack or using some of the best in class, but you have to be careful that you're not using 15 different systems and 15 different logins, and and it's a balancing act. We want the best products out there, but we also need to recognize that you can't have, and if my IT people were here, they would be shocked that I would say this, but that you can't have 15 different systems that are doing these things that you have to integrate in, because it creates, and Pratik's nodding his head, this is like, yes, it creates a nightmare on the behind the scenes. It looks like spaghetti. For those of us that are old, we remember the old phone boxes and cable boxes that were in the buildings, and you'd go see 4,000 wires plugged in and you didn't know where anything went. Well, when we have too many integrations, the same thing happens. So it's picking those that are really going to solve problems and that your teams are going to use, and that your residents and prospects are going to use.
Yep.
Along those lines, Pratik, how do you suggest getting buy-in from your team, aside from what Cindy said, that they bring the technologies they feel are useful to you?
Yeah, no, great question, Suzanne. So I think just piggybacking off what Cindy and Tim said, right, is I think you really need to show your residents as well as your associates the value of using AI. And I would say, many times I've seen associates with an AvalonBay struggle using multiple systems or best in breed solutions, like 15 of them, which are not integrated. And then they're literally spending a lot of time summarizing a call, copy pasting stuff between systems so that all the systems accurately show that particular outcome. Now, in lieu of reducing those routine mundane tasks from the hands of our associates, so think of it, right, like the Staples easy button. You press a button, all the systems that need to be updated are updated. Gives back a lot of time to your associates to really focus on the high value, meaningful impact kind of tasks. So if I take a customer service associate, right, rather than picking up the phone call, talking to the resident or the prospect for a minute, spending 10 minutes documenting that call, updating the systems, now they can quickly pick up the call with a click of a button, everything is updated, and then they can quickly move on to the next call or provide a much better in-person interaction. So I've seen, going to many communities, I've seen a lot of people who are front office who are just behind the computers doing routine mundane tasks. And wouldn't it be great to eliminate all of those so that they can really focus on meeting and greeting the customer?
And continuing along the lines of how AI's likely to change your team, is already changing your team, Cindy, how will the implementation change the roles on your team, and how do you balance the use of AI tools with the human touch? Some of it, I guess, is obvious, but beyond the obvious.
Yeah, I think that this is the big debate that you'll see. You will have, I think, the two extremes, and hopefully somewhere in the middle is where we land. I've heard some people say, oh, we're going to be able to replace everybody on site with AI and we won't need people. And then you'll have the other extreme, which is we're never going to use AI. It's all going to be people. I think the reality is, or at least from my standpoint, is that the middle of the road is where you need to be. What are those things that, and Pratik has said this a couple of times now, what are those things that we can take away from our site teams that drag them down and don't allow them to spend the time with residents on the important things, which is creating that community and giving great service to our residents? I think that human touch is really important. And I liken it to, we need to be able to meet our customers where they want to be met. So if you think about hotels these days, I can check in online, I can never go to the front desk, and I can go right to my room because I can get a mobile key. Or I can check in online and still go to a front desk and get a key, or I can go check in at the front desk. That allows people to make the choice that works best for them. And I think that that is going to be critical as we move forward in multifamily, is how do we work best? How do we offer optionality to our customers so that they are able to do that, which means we have to offer optionality to our teams. We have to take those things away from our teams that get them locked in offices. You know, Pratik mentioned it, push a button so that everything's populated. Not having to do manual reports because we're pulling them out of 5 different systems, being able for all of that to be automated by AI, you know, looking at tools that can compare what's on the lease to what's in the system and identify those so we don't have a human trying to match them up. Let's find those mistakes and fix them so that our teams are spending their time taking care of our residents, talking to the residents about those things that that are bothering them or that they need help with, or just having pleasant interactions with them to create that sense of community. And I think that's going to be the balance of how you keep the human touch, but also make it more efficient for our teams. You know, we always talk about this, and I've been around a long time. Every time we add something new, we think, oh, it's going to save everybody so much time. It really hasn't. All it's done is made people want things faster. We can't wait 5 seconds for anything anymore. If we're on a phone or we're doing something and it doesn't come up instantly. So the more that we can automate things that allow our teams to give that kind of responsiveness, I think the better off we're going to be. And AI is probably one of the first tools we've seen that can actually reduce the times that our teams are spending on things versus adding a new report or adding some new piece to it. And I agree with Aaron when he was talking about the workflows. I think as we see these things come through, that's where it's going to help us. I would love to see more of the AI being used in maintenance, and we haven't seen as much of that. Not necessarily doing the work, although you'll hear people talk about robots. I think it's more about finding the trends so that we can be more proactive in our maintenance versus reactive in the maintenance. What are those areas where maybe we need more training, or we're starting to see a system fail and we can see those trends, and AI can point those out because they can look at the data in the system. So to Pratik's point earlier, the data being good is going to make a big difference. If we have bad data, the output from AI is going to be bad. So I think they all work together, and it's managing all of those to get to that human touch.
Yeah, you know, I think it bears a little bit of repeating, and of course Cindy is 100% correct. I offer this quote from the longtime chairman and founder of Federal Express, Fred Smith, and I figure if I use this quote enough, eventually it'll get attributed to me, which is to automate the routine and to personalize the exceptional, and giving your users, again, whether it's internal or external, as many off-ramps as they need from technology so that they can choose their own adventure. I don't foresee that changing anytime soon, because as automated as we like to become, there will always be circumstances that need some thinking outside that box, literally, right? So it's interesting to me how varied these customer experiences can be as portrayed to us by our prospects and by our internal customers, right? like Cindy said, some people, you know, they just want to know if they get Wi-Fi in their apartment, if their phone can get a good signal, and they don't even need to see it, right? They don't care. Other people want to be handheld, and we'll always have to allow that. And just as a side note, that's why when the whole talk of centralization began, and so many places started with leasing, that I didn't foresee centralizing leasing as a good first place to start, right? We started more with the internal, taking reports away from the sites and having centralized teams do the reports again, so people can be heads up. So yeah, I think Cindy hit it right on the head, and that it's all about pleasing your customer, and that you've got to. People aren't going anywhere in this business.
One thing to add on that, just going off what Tim and Cindy both said with those off ramps. So I kind of look at this as a new service that's being offered to the public, and they have to become accustomed to it. For example, if you look at phone trees, you know, when people would call in, people don't necessarily hate phone trees. They hate it when they don't work.
Right.
When they get you lost into oblivion, or you press or say the number and it just repeats it, and that's what they hate. They don't mind listening to a very short message, clicking, going right to the person that I need to talk to. And so, as these new agents or performers come online that we start to use for leasing and for maintenance and for everything else, yes, you do have to have a very easy off ramp for them to talk to a human if that's the desire. But what's going to happen is they're going to be on that phone call, who talk, you know, or chatting in a bot, and say, "Yeah, I'll just try it." And if that experience is good, if that experience is better than what they had in the past, they will adopt that and they will appreciate it. I think that's one of the big keys, is just kind of understanding this adoption rate for this new technology and how you can help facilitate that in your business. One other quick point is, I think you as a company really need to sit down and look at what your AI policy is, because that's what you're communicating to your employees, and that's where they're taking their cues off of. And so, yes, you need to be careful about uploading PPI information, or PII, yeah, personal identifiable information, into any of these systems. But there are paid corporate accounts that don't allow that. You have a more safe entry to do so. And so enable your teams and get them to start utilizing some of the really low-hanging fruit, as I said before, of AI. For example, a really easy one is Synthesia, or using Loom to quickly record a video and produce a SOP. That kind of work internally with your teams can dramatically increase their efficiency. And those are just little pieces, not necessarily a big part of operating the property management ecosphere system, but it can help your teams. And so you want to empower them, but in a guided way.
Can I make 3 comments, Suzanne?
Please.
And so one keys in on Aaron's last comment, which Cindy also mentioned. And I think it goes to this idea of what customers want. And just as a little anecdote, you know, I have an old car, and so I know my mechanic very well. And I love my mechanic, and I actually love talking to him. And I'll just drop by his place sometimes after work just to say hi before I go home. But after a long day of meetings, I'm thrilled to get into a Waymo, because I'm not really in the mood to talk to a taxi driver at that point. And having a self-driving taxi is kind of enjoyable. And so I think even within the same person, we have different desires sometimes to interact or not interact. And I think that is one of the powers of AI, especially if it's implemented well. Like Aaron was saying, you have to have this off ramp to potentially talk to the person. But also the on-site team becomes more important, because they become more like the mechanic. And I think we all know that that's their therapists, their helpers in so many ways. I think that relationship building can be really powerful. The other 2 comments I was going to say is the customization by property is key. Cindy mentioned kind of the hotel, like you may want to just have your mobile key and you just go straight up to your room and you don't talk to anybody, or you go and talk to the front desk, et cetera. And I think for a lot of owner operators, managers, et cetera, it depends on the property. Do you have enough staffing in that particular property? Do you have the ability to meet the needs of every single one of those potential scenarios? And you may not. And so you have to have the ability to configure by property, what do you want the behavior to be? And I think the more customization and the more configurability that clients are allowed to have, the better, because it actually accounts for the real life constraints that might be there in that particular property. And then the final thing is, it seems kind of bizarre to say, but I actually think AI is going to become commoditized very quickly. Like it has not been, there've clearly been innovators in the AI space in the last, let's say, 24 months, but very, very soon it's going to become commoditized. And then Pratik, Cindy, others have made the point, Tim's made the point, the data, the tools being accessible and being consistent and being powerful is going to become kind of the key thing that allows clients to scale. So I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, which is to build agentic workflows will become something that I actually think a lot of clients will have as their second nature capability. I don't think it's going to be far off that whether it's IT teams or marketing teams or operations teams, I think that skill will come actually very quickly. It's not going to be that different from building a workflow chart and some workflow design tool. And the skill set will become about teams that can do that, the data being in one place, and it's going to be less about whatever AI platform you're using. I think that will all actually become pretty commoditized pretty soon.
You make a great point about it being a skill, and using AI is a skill. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing, because even with the simplest AI that we started with, and others on the call have, right, in working with prospects and sales calls, that AI has now become their first experience with your company. And if you're not monitoring it and finding out where those calls are going, finding out what actual information is being provided, that's not a good experience, right? Or at worst could be incorrect information, right? The good news is that, as we talked about earlier, especially with sensitive topics, you've got consistency in answers. The bad news is you've got consistency in answers, and if it's wrong, it's always going to be wrong. So developing that skill and how to manipulate AI so that it's doing what you want it to do is every bit as important as any other skill. Otherwise, then the robots will take over.
What kind of what kind of testing should you be doing to make sure that your AI is working the way you should be? And we had talked about this during the planning meeting. The fact, as you said, Tim, it's not a set it and forget it. And one of the risks is that you just assume it's working the way you want it to, and it's really not. Maybe it is the problems with how the users, how the residents are experiencing it, or other problems that may come up that you didn't even anticipate. What sort of testing should you be doing and keeping in mind to identify, I guess, the most frequent problems that can occur? You
Well,
can't anticipate everything, obviously.
yeah, and I am probably amongst the least AI savvy when it comes to this. But number one, and with my tech partners, is I want a dashboard that allows me to see when calls are terminated before a specific point. I want to know when the off ramp is taken, right? And is it taken because of frustration, or is it taken because I've asked a question that AI can't answer. Surveying, making sure you're getting feedback from your users of throughout the process. And again, being brutally honest with yourself about how it's going as you look at those. So those are a couple of the tools that I like to use. I'd love to hear what other.
I would add and take a step back, and Pratik said this, and we do this at Bell as well, which is pilot. You want to pilot it and make sure it works. Is it solving the problem you think it's going to solve? Does it work the way you think it's going to work? Is it as easy as you think it is for your users, both your associates and your prospects? So before you roll this out to, however many properties you're going to roll it out to, start with a pilot. And I always tell people, find somebody that's going to love it, somebody that's going to resist it, that hates it, and then somebody in between. Because if you can get the people that hate it, that don't like change at all, to begrudgingly say this actually works, then you found a successful tool. So I think you need to start there. And then Tim hit the nail on the head. You have to have ways to check, whether that's dashboards, And then it's also periodically, have a regular interval where someone's actually going to use it from the customer standpoint. Go to, we talk about it, go look at your website, go try the chatbot, is it giving the answers you want? Does it work the way we think it's working? Because to Tim's point, you can't just set it and forget it. So having those checkpoints. And one of the biggest things is when, look, we get software upgrades all the time. And we think, okay, well, the software upgrade went through. A lot of times it changes things. And if
Yes.
we're not going back and checking to make sure that it didn't throw the AI tool off, we could be consistently being wrong again. So it's making sure that you do have those guardrails and those checkpoints in place so that it works the way you want it to work.
To add to that, Cindy, and I apologize when we do release things that change things, but your point about pilots, it's a key one, because from my standpoint, and our sales team may not always want to hear this, but our job is to make software that helps clients. And so you guys piloting it allows you to give us feedback so that we can actually improve the product or do what we need to make it better for you. And I think that that is a key thing. It limits the risk for clients. It improves the quality of the end result for operators. And I think it's exactly the right approach to handle that. One thing that I think is now becoming more and more common, which we've started a large AI monitoring team, and like their job is to monitor every conversation that happens, and you have to have that. And we didn't have that for a long time, and I think it resulted in less than optimal experiences. And I think AI can become more and more predictable and more powerful, but it can't yet monitor itself fully. It's helpful to have humans start out and develop the basic levels of assessment of what is a good conversation, what's not a good conversation, et cetera. And then eventually that can also be automated, but it can't be automated out of the gate.
How many of us have yelled at AI? Because I certainly have. When it doesn't give you the answer that you want, or I think it was Aaron that said it keeps repeating the same thing, even though we get frustrated. So to your point, Arjun, if we can check those things and figure out what is it getting stuck on so that we can unstick it, or we are going to have those experiences that we don't want our customers to have.
That's right.
I think one other thing as well is, especially with smaller business operators, you definitely need to start looking at your personnel and getting at least one general technologist. That's what I call them in your business. The reason why is most people on this call here are the visionaries. Maybe also act as the integrators. But then after that, who owns it going forward, and who makes sure that this continues to happen? And in the past, we've been able to just get on systems and learn and use them that are very much a CRM type of a feel, type of a usage. If you understand, websites, you can get that very easily, understand that. But with this coming out, you need to understand how it works on the back end. You need to understand a little bit more. And so I strongly suggest to operators, because usually the CEOs and COOs are not geared this way, to have a technologist on your team that has that responsibility. One of the things that I heard, I was reading an article the other day, and this is about no coding. It's kind of fun, a hobby on the side I like to go and do. And it's really going to change in the future. And I think it's with this as well. It's not how well you can just describe something, it's how well you can write parameters. Because that is what is going to tell it how to act. Those parameters are also going to be your safe your guardrails in saying, hey, you're outside of these parameters, and then you can tell that there's an issue. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a shift and opening in personnel of job descriptions and what you want in your business.
So we are about to go to Q&A. So if anybody's got any questions, please do submit them in that Q&A button so that we can ask them of the panelists. I would like to look a little bit to the future before we get there. Arjun, where do you see the greatest potential for AI to drive measurable ROI in the multifamily industry in the near term?
In the near term, so it depends how you define the near term, but I think even by the end of 2026, there will have been significant opportunities both on the consumer side. I think we've talked a lot about, for prospects, for residents, whether it's on the leasing side or on the maintenance side, or I think there's already been a lot of innovation there, and a lot of clients are starting to take advantage of that. And so I think that will continue to get deeper and deeper, but that's already kind of started in earnest. I think on the enterprise side, there hasn't actually been that much yet. And I'll give an example. We had a client who said, "Can you just build me a simple agent workflow where at the end of our work order, our technicians can't close the work order. They have to say their tech is complete, and then our property management team will review the work order, and then they'll close it." And it's a manual process. It's often delayed. It's a kind of a labor-intensive, time-consuming thing, and it gets deprioritized often. So we built a simple agent that said, "Okay, here's all these work orders that are in tech complete. Email the property manager with all these tech, with which ones have done the things that they would typically look for. Did they attach photos? Did they write their tech notes? Did they propose their solution, etc." And now this person can reply to the email and say, "Good, close them all," and it'll close them all. And so it's a much faster, just very simple, right? There's nothing crazy about it, but it helps the property manager and it makes their life easier. I think we will start to see many, many more of those types of workflows and use cases over the course of the next 12 months, especially as more and more of the PM systems give this capability to do this. And I think clients will start to see a lot of benefit there. But I'll say a related note to that, Suzanne, which is the impetus then becomes either on the operators or on third-party consultants or whoever to figure out what are the business processes that are the highest priority ones to become, automated or go through this type of process. And that is a skill set that is very much going to be in demand, I think. And so if clients have it in their staff, outstanding, but if not, then other groups will have to have it.
Okay, thanks. And Aaron, what kind of new revenue streams might AI produce?
I was thinking about this the other night, and it was kind of fun just to go down the rabbit hole of what can happen. I mean, as you look at this, it's a new service that you're going to be paying for. So right now in your mind, you should be thinking agents are performers. They're going to be performing certain tasks for it, and there's going to be a cost associated with that. As in most businesses, that cost usually gets us pushed over to the consumer side. And I think there's ways that they're going to be able to commoditize that in the future. Is that a service or a level that is a higher that the user wants? Having instant access, having some of these value adds to them, you might be able to commoditize that. Data, I think, is going to be able to be a new revenue stream. As you start to do more advanced algorithms and projections for your clients, that's worth something, that you are adding value to that. And so I think as you look through your business, you're definitely going to start to see definite room for revenue streams. One of the biggest, though, that is AI isn't just about cutting those costs, it's about unlocking capacity. And so when you automate repetitive work, your people can start to focus on growth. And so that's one of the sure signs, and right off the bat, where you're going to see an increase in revenues is because of that shift of focus and efforts put into it.
And just
Okay,
to
I'd
thank
love to
you.
know what other people are thinking though on how you see AI shifting revenue streams.
Yes, I'll probably just add on to what Aaron said, right? So agree with you, Aaron. I think traditionally I was seeing our industry, right, really kind of be opposed to a lot of new services that, as apartment owners, operators, we could offer to our residents because of all the operational overhead that is associated with it. So think of it, right? If it's a digital parking solution, yes, if it doesn't work, you need a person 24/7 at the facility to open the gate because it's an operational overhead. Now, using AI and a lot of remote monitoring tools, technologies, could it enable additional services? And I'm talking about, services like a dog walker, a nanny, with smart access, etc. I believe AI and automation will reduce a lot of the operational overhead needed for these services and can probably lead to new revenue streams as well for the apartment operator. And another example I'll say, I think it goes back to the community is, we are piloting community feeds But all of you know that community feeds are a good way to spread hate or whatever offensive language, etc. Can't we have AI agents instead of a person monitoring that feed 24/7? Can't we have an AI agent monitor that feed as well? So those are some of the things I'm seeing it enable or unlock without a lot of operational overhead.
One,
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say just really quickly, I think that where Pratik went is where I do. I'm not, I think what it's going to do is free up more revenue versus because it's going to reduce overhead. We are going to be able to find things that AI can do so that it's not about eliminating the people you have. It's using them in different ways, but it's also not having to add people when you add new services or new technologies, that the ability to bring in additional services and additional things without having to add overhead is also going to help us from a revenue standpoint.
Thank you. Let's turn now to some questions from the audience because we do have several coming in. And I do encourage further questions if anybody's got any more. The first one I've got is, what are some of the decisions to help make a build versus buy decision? Whoever'd like to take that.
I'll take a quick stab at a portion of that. Let's say, one thing that you should be really conscious is of who are you partnering with? What vendors are you using? Who is your main operating system? The reason why is, I started into property management about 13 years ago. APIs were prevalent. They knew what they were, but they weren't being used a ton. And so one of the things that we had to do was really go out to our vendors and say, we have it as a requirement that we have APIs so that we can start to have these systems tied together. And so if you can find an open operating system like Yardi, Propertyware, any of those other big names out there, and you want to look at their philosophy, because as we've seen, the industry has opened up more and more so that there's more interconnectivity between different vendors giving best in class services. And as we get into AI, you want to be partnered with the right person so that in the future, you will be able to plug in best in class AI, that plumbing, because that's what is missing right now in the industry, and that's what has to be built out for a lot of these workflows and processes and value to be added to your company. So, first off, look at your partnerships, your vendors, make sure you have the right relationships in place. And then for the most part, it takes a lot of money to build. I don't think most people have it in their chops, but the big thing that you can do is focus on your data and get that in order.
I was gonna say too, it's an interesting question because it would never even occur to me to try to build something like this. It moves too fast. Now I know I'm coming from the standpoint of a 130-year-old company where nothing moves fast, but by the time you build it, what are the chances it's no longer, it's obsolete? But it's an interesting thought. But God bless you if you want to give it a go.
One thing
All
I'll
right.
say, Suzanne, can I
Sure,
kind
of
of go a
course.
little bit more into detail on that?
Yeah.
When I think about technology these days, as someone who kind of builds technology, it used to be that you program everything from scratch, and if you take the way we did something 10 years ago, we had OCR, right? The optical character recognition technology 10 years ago that we built from scratch, and we used it up until some number of years ago. And then we said, well, there's a lot better solutions out there that are best in class that we would plug into our solutions. So even our solution is not just our solution. It's actually a set of solutions that are out there that we then put together and put on top. And so in one way you could say, oh, well, then it's easier to just build because I as an operator can do the same thing. But the counterpoint to that is because many of these things are becoming more and more available off the shelf, I think the price of the buy is going to keep going down. And so it's going to be difficult for an operator to build something that will be more cost effective than just buying off the shelf. And to a lot of the points that were made, Tim and Aaron brought this up recently, the customization, the openness, the ability to do whatever the workflows are that you want, that has to be in the solution you choose. But if they are, then I think that that's almost certainly going to be the right path.
Yeah, I would add to that I think it's kind of it is expensive to build. There may be pieces that you want that are customizable where you're pulling information in to a system. But I think the days of building your own systems, there are still companies that probably do it, but for most of us, that's going to be very difficult because it does change so quickly. But we can build some of those foundational things for our data that we can then use the tools. And so I think it's a little more of a hybrid approach versus just, oh, we're going to build the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I've got somebody from a small investment firm, very small. It says under 10 employees, asking how they go about hiring a data science or technology person tasked with implementing AI into asset management and investment analysis workflow. Are there fractional chief AI officers, or do you have to look at hiring from other industries?
I think I have a few, I can wait, but I have a few thoughts on that. I'll defer to others though first.
I think you
Well, I
should
can
answer,
probably
Arjun.
I think probably many people on this call have heard this term MCP servers, model context protocol. I think a lot of um, a lot of, I would say, data products out on the market, and we have one called Yardi Matrix, but there's others. They need to start to integrate with Claude, with ChatGPT, et cetera, so that really any of your investment professionals can take all the market data that's out there and then use the power of these large language models to mine that information. And you can hook up an Excel spreadsheet of your own data or whatever basic level of data capture that you have, you can hook it up to that same instance of it. I think one of the panelists mentioned at the beginning, you'll want to have your own probably corporate enterprise grade license, so you're not sharing all this information out to other areas. But I don't think you need anything overly fancy from a person that you need to hire. I think your people, if they're good investment professionals, they're going to be the right people, but you will need somebody maybe to help you or you yourself figure out how can I get access to this market data that is in some program that we probably already license? How can I get that to Claude or ChatGPT? And almost certainly, if they don't have it, they will have it very soon because it's now becoming kind of the standard in the industry. So you may not need to do anything much beyond that.
And go to that question, I would think, look at what you're trying to accomplish. You probably don't need a CTO level. You're not building it yourself. So what the person that you're looking for is probably mid, or even lower, who consumes online. Just their life is getting into systems and figuring them out. Somebody who does really well in a CRM system and can make it dance and sing and do everything they want to is probably somebody who could help you with the rest of that implementation or finding out or getting things lined up and monitoring it. And so I would first start out with what your desired outcome is, and that will help you to see what kind of level you really need. And I don't think it necessarily uh, is a really high level CTO or engineer.
Okay, one additional question. Is anyone using RAG techniques to utilize customer data in LLM reasoning?
Yeah, all the major tools I would say are I mean, certainly the top AI tools out there are using it. We're using it for sure. Yeah, it's essentially arming the LLM with more information about the customer as it comes back with information or it comes back with a generative response. So absolutely.
Okay, I guess one more question. How can, wait a second, we just got one more in here. All right, so my clients are CEOs of integrated tech solutions to multifamily and senior living operators, including remote third-party vendors that pre-qualify residents, pre-cons, drone, and 3D floor plan platforms and video messaging virtual tour tools. Any best practices for creating a bidirectional CRM interface to avoid spaghetti? If you made it through all the spaghetti I just read.
Yeah.
Shannon, I think you might be on your own on that one. I think we need a lot more context to give you some
Uh-oh.
good insight into
Okay.
that. But I appreciate the question.
Well, we could defer that one to an offline conversation unless anybody else wants to weigh in. Otherwise, I'll just ask, I do have somebody asking about how they can develop AI-based applications specific to optimizing energy and water resource management in multifamily.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about with the trends. This is where, as you get data, and Pratik talked a lot about this and probably can talk better about it than I can. But as you get the data for your organization, to be able to have AI in there looking and saying, this is an outlier. They're using double the water of a similar size property, or there's been a spike in your electric here is something for you to look at. I think those are the areas where it's going to help us, whether that's on utilities, whether that's on expenses, repairs and maintenance, all of those things, versus someone trying to look at it. Having AI be able to give that information so that then your operators can make the decisions about what needs to be done, versus having to go search for the information, determine what the trend is, and then try to figure it out. Because it'll take them, by the time they figure out what the trend is, it's probably too late.
Yep.
And so I think that's where AI can make a big difference from that standpoint.
I know there's some companies that are doing that now, and that's basically marrying your billing information with your operating system, like Yardi.
Correct.
Electrical usage high and it's empty, somebody forgot to turn the AC down, or along those lines. And so that's what I know. I think Conservice does that, and some others where they monitor the billing coming in. And so if you're going to build your own, I think that would be a good place to start to try to tie those two pieces of information together.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are out of time. We will be sending everyone a link when the recording's available. And if you enjoyed this webinar, please keep an eye out for our communications on upcoming MHN Voices webinars, including a 2026 Outlook that'll be happening in December. In addition, our sister brand, Commercial Property Executive, will be offering a 2026 Outlook for commercial real estate on November 18th, if you're interested in registering for that. Thank you again to all of our speakers for today's extremely interesting discussion. And thank you again to our audience for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all.